1%er Podcast with Sam Bakhtiar, bringing you the 1% knowledge to help you reach your full potential. Learn what it takes to rise above the 99% and become a 1%er.
Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Sam Bakhtiar with the 1%er Podcast. And I have my really good friend, Dr. Saman. He has the same name as me, Dr. Saman Soleymani, internal medical doctor, here, and a performance doctor. And I mean, he specializes in losing body fat, gaining muscle tone, longevity, anti-aging. I mean, I can go on and on and on about his, about all that he has achieved. But doctor, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Sam. So glad to have you on this morning, and I'm glad you were able to make some time, and I was able to cut out some time out of my schedule to make this happen. Looking forward to it.
I'm thankful for your time. You have achieved so much. I can't even remember half the stuff that you've achieved. But just really quick, for our viewers, for our people who are listening to this podcast, tell me about your training, your background, and what do you do today?
Sure. My training, I started, I'm originally back from Iran, same place as you, and came into the country at a very early age at 13 years old. When I came here, didn't speak the language and, quickly learned and became fluent. Educational system is completely different over there. And because of that, they pushed me up pretty quickly. And I ended up graduating high school at 15, college at 19, and I had my MD at 23. And then went on to do training at University of Florida in internal medicine, left and stayed on as an assistant professor at University of Florida, taught medicine there. During that time, I was a national speaker for Pfizer and Janssen and Janssen and a couple of other smaller pharmaceutical companies, giving national talks to other physicians. And now I have, Avecina Medical, which is a multi-specialty practice with several offices in North Florida.
That's amazing, man. That's amazing. And I know that, the way we got connected, I saw you through Instagram, and I saw that we have so much in common. Not only our name is the same, Saman, right? We're both doctors. We both went, I'm a doctor of chiropractic, you're a medical doctor. And then we both love, body transformation, anti-aging. We both love losing body fat and gaining muscle. And, I got on a call with you just a few weeks ago, and you blew my mind. Like, you really blew my mind on everything that you knew about, anatomy, physiology, obviously, but not only most doctors know about pathology and how to fix a problem, but you also knew about optimization, which not many doctors, know about.
The problem is, unfortunately, the problem is that, modern medicine as it is, and just going through medical school, it's really not part of the curriculum because you're studying really kind of deep-seated pathology and kind of the run-of-the-mill stuff that you come across. I mean, to this day, there's not a curriculum in medical school that talks about low testosterone or even what happens with, it's always been menopause for women, but we know that there's andropause in men, and, what happens. Even the laboratory companies, the biggest ones such as Quest and LabCorp, still do not have even their values as far as what's considered normal and out of normal range updated in the last 40 to 50 years. So it's a constant struggle when I'm talking to a patient or an insurance company where they're like, well, this person's testosterone level shows to be 270, and that looks to be in the normal range based on what this normal range is. And, I feel like I just need to have a pre-recorded conversation of myself that there's no way, if a normal range of any lab is from 200 to 1100, that if you were 201, you're normal. And if you're 1099, you're normal, because that's a six-fold difference between the two. Yeah. So trying to just get through that. And unfortunately, modern medicine obviously does a lot of things, but for some of these very niche type classes of patients that we deal with, you have to have done other training, other research, which thank God, I was highly interested in and pursued those.
See, I'm in the health and fitness business. Over the past 20 years, I own gyms, and all I cared about is trying to get people the body that they wanted, right? Whatever it was, most people want to lose some body fat, gain some muscle tone, and be healthy. And there was a certain population of people that no matter what I did, I mean, they would just come in and they follow the diet to a T. They exercise, 5-6 days a week, and they come up to me and say, Sam, I'm not getting results. And you know what? At first, I was questioning their integrity. I'm like, there's no way you're eating this kind of food and you're exercising this much and you're not getting results. It's just the law of thermodynamics. There's no way you're not getting any results. And then come to find out that there was other issues underlying, whether it was hormonal, thyroid, or cortisol, or even they weren't getting enough, the right amount of sleep. And that's when I had to remember to be able to now, look at it at a 30,000 foot view, because if your body is working against you, then there's nothing you really can do with exercise and nutrition to be able to battle. I mean, it's still going to help, but it's not going to help as much as you think.
It definitely is a multifaceted approach. And, again, most people come in wanting a magic pill. And my famous kind of one-liner is, if there was a magic pill, Oprah Winfrey would be 110 pounds, and she's worth $3 billion, so she can afford that. But it just does not exist. It does not exist. So,
so when somebody, comes to me, for example, and, and we see that she's doing, he or she's doing everything that she can, right? He or she can, right? And no matter what, they're not getting the results that they should be getting. What I would like to do is, then send them to their primary care medicine, medical doctor and say, hey, let's do some labs.
Sure.
What are some of the labs that I should be looking for? And what are some labs that they should be looking for? Let's just say somebody wants to get in great shape. They will say, let me just do my blood work, make sure I'm optimized.
Absolutely. So that's kind of like one of the first things, obviously, on the medical side. If someone comes in and says, hey, I've gained weight, whether in a very short time or over a long period of time, and depending on how severe it is, it can change how you approach it. But typically, if someone comes in with a significant body weight than what they should be, which by the time I'm seeing a patient, they're not trying to lose 10 pounds, they're losing 50 pounds or more compared to what they should be. And by those, we generally want to just get an overall the two of the basic things, what we call complete metabolic profile and a CBC. And that's just to, the complete metabolic profile, basically checks your fasting sugar, your kidney levels, your liver, see how those are functioning, make sure nothing funky is going on there. Your CBC is just to check your hemoglobin levels, white blood cells, make sure there's no immunodeficiencies, any of that stuff going on. And then that's just right off the bat. And then, of course, on that first test, we definitely draw a TSH, free T3, and free T4. And that's the thyroid is something that most, I would say 95% of my patients don't understand. Most practitioners, just even if they're cognizant enough to check thyroid, all they check is a TSH, which is the thyroid stimulating hormone.
So for example, let me stop you. So, usually they say that if the TSH is high, that your thyroid levels, you're not producing enough thyroid. Is that correct?
Correct. So the thyroid
stimulating loopback system.
Yeah. So the thyroid stimulating. So the TSH is obviously not thyroid, and that's what everyone thinks. Thyroid stimulating hormone, based on its name, is a signaling hormone that tells the hypothalamus, hey, and pituitary, I need more, to tell your thymus, hey, I need more thyroid. Please make some more. Okay. So it is an inverse relationship. So what that means is that the lower your actual thyroid level, the less of TSH you're going to have, because the body is happy. The only, what I tell patients with you understand it is like checking your credit report. If you have a lot of inquiries over the last 30 days, that means your credit kind of sucks, right? Because for you to have a lot of inquiries, that means you asked one, they turned you down. You asked for another credit agency, they turned you down, So the less inquiry, it means that you're good. The more inquiry, so the TSH is literally that credit check. So if the TSH is high, it keeps saying, I need more thyroid, because it's low. On the flip side, if the TSH is very, very low, that means your thyroid is high, and you're not producing any TSH because you already have enough or more than enough. So to actually check your thyroid, it has to be really coincided with checking the TSH plus the free T3 and free T4, because your thyroid is made up of two hormones, which is T3 and T4. And the reason we call them T3, T4, without getting too nerdy for this, is basically the T4 is considered the inactive version of the thyroid because it has an extra iodine attached to that. And there's a process that happens where an iodine gets detached. And when it becomes T3, it is the actual active compound. And the reason we say check free T3 and free T4, because a T3 or T4 that is bound to hormone is really not considered active, so we don't care about the non-free in the T portion.
Kind of like the free testosterone, right? Free testosterone.
Exactly. So we check the T3, free T3, free T4, TSH as part of that initial lab. One of the other things is, CDC, I mentioned to you on our call, I put out a statement literally a month ago that currently 50% of Americans are either diabetic or pre-diabetic, which is pretty insane. And so
50%?
50% are either diabetic or pre-diabetic. And obviously, pre-diabetes means that you will become diabetic in 3 to 5 years. So the pre-diabetic patients are the ones that already have signs of what we call insulin resistance or glucose intolerance. These are the fancy terms that you'll see thrown out there. So automatically, what I like to do is check a lab called the Hemoglobin A1c. And a Hemoglobin A1c basically is looking at what your sugar profile has been over the last 3 months. And the reason that's important versus just a fasting glucose is because a fasting glucose is a spot check. So you could kind of be a diabetic, but if you want to fool your doctor, you can show up in the morning and not eating anything the last 24 hours, and your glucose will kind of look kind of somewhat normal. But what you cannot do is fool me with a hemoglobin A1c, because I'm going to see what's happened the last 90 days.
Nice.
So what'll happen is that it's surprising, you'll be shocked how many patients that are overweight and have difficulty losing weight are already diabetic and they don't know it, or they're pre-diabetic and they don't know it. And that's what makes them hold on to all the body fat, because when you're in that situation, you're in a storage mode. Because your insulin is not working, so it shoots up through the sky, and insulin is a storage hormone. It has negative feedback mechanism on other hormones that allow you to feel full and have that feeling of satiety. So there's just many. So one thing that I guess, so going back to what labs I like to order, so we talked about complete metabolic profile, the CBC, getting your thyroid profile with those 3 that I mentioned, a hemoglobin A1c to look at your sugars for the last 90 days. Depending on whether it's male or female, I obviously like to check testosterone, estradiol, progesterone, if it's a female, of course. But a lot of our patients, many times women come in and they're completely don't even think of testosterone. All they think of is, I think I'm going to get my estrogen and progesterone checked. And I have to remind them that testosterone is probably one of the most single important in a female, because traditionally it's been always associated with males, but that's what gives a woman their drive, their metabolism, their muscle tone, their aggressiveness, their libido in the bedroom. All that is, estrogen is what makes your skin soft and your nail grow and your hair soft and shiny. But that's about it. Estrogen has nothing to do with your metabolism. Estrogen has nothing to do with your weight loss. It's really testosterone. And I always like to refer back, compare the men and women. It's really the inverse. Just like men think estrogen is such a bad thing, but no, you need that little bit of estrogen. And, guys that are on testosterone replacement therapy or for other reason are using other anabolic substances, when they drive their estrogen down too low, they start having significant other side effects from that.
What are some of the side effects, like joint pain,
Significant. You'll see, and you'll see this all the time with lifters where they're tearing tendons, popping biceps tendon, pectoralis tendon. What happens is estrogen is needed for those tendons and soft tissue to stay pliable, to be very flexible and stretchy. And what ends up happening is that when estrogen is driven really low, and I typically don't like any of my male patients to have a testosterone below 30, and estradiol below 30. When they start driving that down too much, then everything literally creaks. They could have a testosterone level of 5,000, They won't be able to have an erection because you actually need some estradiol. You know, it's a dual hormone. Just think about it this way. If
Well,
we
wait a
weren't,
second.
if
Wait
we
a
were
second.
not meant to have estradiol in our system, we just wouldn't have any from birth. But you could be 18 years old at the peak of your youth, and if I check your levels, you're going to have an estradiol level between 30 to 40, and that's what is natural, and that's when you were at the best, you know,
Yep.
best ever. You know,
Yep.
we wish we could get back to when we were 18 years old as far as how the body normally functions. So the same thing with women. Women typically have a testosterone healthy somewhere between 40 to 70, but they need that 40 to 70. If it starts coming to 20, 10, I mean, I've had women in their 40s and 50s where we've checked their testosterone level and it shows like 1, like literally 1 or 2. And those, when we replace those, they have significant improvement.
And that can lead to depression as well, couldn't it? You know, that low level of testosterone, man. I mean, I know I've seen both a lot of women and men, you know, kind of just get depressed.
Significant. I mean, it is those hormones in our body essentially run our lives. They decide on a day-to-day basis your sleep pattern, your what I call nutrition processing. Everything is dependent on, and especially with women, you know, as far as osteoporosis, you know, women are significantly more prone to osteoporosis than men because of the lack of testosterone they have throughout their whole life and usual lack of resistant exercise, because you need those bones to be under resistance for the calcium deposition to become more compact and more rigid, so they have nice denser bones that are not hollow, that don't break in their 50s and 60s. So with women, it's really important to make sure that their hormone profile is kind of copacetic.
Now, I've seen more and more women these days that are on TRT, which freaked me out in the beginning. Because back when I was growing up, testosterone was only for men. You know what I mean? I remember when I was bodybuilding, like, women never took testosterone. I mean, that was like, a no and all that kind of stuff. Women back then maybe took a little bit of Anabar or something like that, and, for bodybuilding purposes or getting themselves lean out. But now I see, when I talk to, some of my friends and colleagues and things like that, I'm on TRT, I'm like, what? Like my heart skips a beat, but obviously if their testosterone level, woman testosterone level is low, they need to be between 40 and 70. So, it's okay to bring them to 40 and 70, even with a little bit.
And that's the beauty of TRT in women, that it literally takes the minuscule amount to get them there. Because mind you, where with men, we're trying to get them between 600 to 800. With women, we're trying to get them to 40 to 70. So for most, it's like a 1/10 of an ml once a week, or and we're not even talking about the 200 milligram per cc. We're talking about 100 milligram per ml and a 1/10 of that. So literally 10 milligrams, 10 to 15 milligrams of testosterone. But typically in a man, it may take 150 milligrams of testosterone a week to get you to that 600 to 800 level. With women, it takes 10 milligrams, 15 milligrams.
How can you even take that intramuscularly? I mean, you should probably take that subcutaneously, right?
No, it's, you use the insulin syringes because they're graduated very thin, and, they're marked in, an insulin syringe typically comes in 30 units. So you can easily draw 10 units, which would be 10 milligrams out of 100 milligram per ml testosterone. And believe it or not, it's such a small amount, a 1/10 of an ml, that it can actually be injected subcutaneously as well. But a lot, many people in the fitness and bodybuilding, I'm sure do that as well. And many times it works actually even better when you do it subcutaneously, because it actually absorbs into the body slower. The only reason that we don't do it in men is because the volume that it requires is significantly more, and the esters in the testosterone and the preparation kind of cause a little bit of an inflammation in the subcutaneous tissue. So men usually will complain that they got a little nodule and it kind of hurts a little bit. But for women, because it is the tiniest amount, like I said, a 1/10 of an ml, they can just inject it literally subcutaneously, and it works beautiful. My mother, who is 72 years old, is on TRT.
You're kidding me.
Absolutely.
That is so awesome. And what are some of the differences that you've seen, in her?
just better energy. I mean, better energy overall. She has osteoporosis. That's one of the reasons I put her on. When she initially came into my office and I did her labs, her total testosterone was like 5. It was like non-existent, which kind of made sense, at her age. So she's been on it for about 5 years now, and she doesn't miss a week. She'll call me like, I'm out of my testosterone.
Awesome. That is awesome.
But I've had, I had a lady maybe just 3 months ago. She came in, she's in her 50s, and she actually works out and was in great shape. But she came in, and her complaint was strictly her lack of libido and sex drive. And she was like, my husband can walk around and I don't even want to look at him. And so the first thing we did, we checked her testosterone level, and it was 1. Like, it literally, I had to double check, make sure I wasn't missing a 0 in the lab sheet, but no, it was 1. And so we put her on a TRT regimen, and she came back for her 6-week follow-up. When she came back, she came with her husband, and her husband immediately shook my hands like, Doc, thank you so much for whatever you did, but can you please reduce the dosage? Because she is chasing me around the house.
That is now, I know when men are on TRT, they cannot have children. It's kind of like a natural birth control.
It becomes much rarer. It still happens. But for sure, testosterone drives down because it shuts off FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone, and LH, which is luteinizing hormone. And those are the ones that cause spermatogenesis and creation of sperm. It significantly reduces sperm count. And it takes about, what a lot of people don't realize is that you have to have at least what's accepted about 9 million sperms per ml in an ejaculation for you to be actually viable. So if the testosterone just suppresses that level below 9 million, you could still have sperm. But let's say if it's 3 million, 4 million, which sounds a lot like to us, but it's not, you just are not going to get anybody pregnant.
Yeah, but you only need 1.
Exactly. But what happens is that they get destroyed. Literally almost 70% get destroyed by contact as soon as they exit. So that's why it takes, a typical healthy male, when you do a sperm analysis, they have somewhere between 30 to 60 million sperms per 1 milliliter. So when you're below 9, this is why people have a very difficult time. So it is in a sense kind of a natural birth control for men.
Now my question to you is, if a woman is on TRT, they're somewhere between 40 and 70, does that do the same thing for them as well? Does it lower the chance of conceiving while they're on TRT?
No, but you have to imagine that women, by the time women, think about it this way, men are going through their andropause, 35 and over, 40 over. Yep. I have patients of mine that have gotten andropause at 30, but then when you kind of delve into it, they tell you, when I was in college, I was stupid. I did a cycle of testosterone, or I took some anabol, whatever they did, something they did that accelerated their decline. Because once you get on any kind of exogenous type of anabolics or androgens, you rapidly decline how quickly you get to your andropause. It's just a fact, no denying it. With women, by the time I see them, they're past the childbearing age. Like, there's not a woman that there's not a woman that's 25 years old that has low T. Like, it just, short of them having like PCOS or some, esoteric disease, by the time I see a female that is they've kind of gone through menopause, and their ovaries have essentially failed. And that's where, ovaries are the genetic identical of the testicles in females and males. And they actually all male, but I hope most people know that we all started as female in the womb. And with the presence of the Y chromosome, when testosterone starts getting produced around, week 2 of the gestation, the ovaries get the signal from testosterone to descend down, and they become the testicles. So
I didn't know that.
Really? Yeah.
I did not know that, Doc.
Yes. So literally, ovaries, you were a female. At 2 weeks
Damn.
of gestation, you were a good-looking little baby girl. And
That testosterone had to come out and make me all ugly and shit.
yeah, and what happens is the moment, so what happens is, like, so the girl is your baseline. So we all start as female. If there is no testosterone present, we all come out as female. How you started. But if testosterone gets produced in the fetus, what happens is the ovaries start to descend from the abdomen down, and they fill what the labia majora would becomes the testicular sac. So the ovaries literally descend down into the labia majora, which become the testicular sac. The actual clitoris grows to become the penis. I mean, anatomically, genetically, it is identical. So what happens is, by the time I see a female for lack of testosterone, they're past the childbearing age anyway. So that's really almost not an issue.
Wow, I'm telling you, I can talk to you for hours and hours. You know, over the years, Doc, you know, I've experienced patients, clients who come to me and they're not losing body fat, and they're on T4, they're on thyroxine, right? You know, and a lot of times, you know, I found that sometimes T4 in some people doesn't necessarily become active.
I'm not a fan of
Have you
T4.
experienced that?
Oh yeah, I'm not. This is why for my patients, I typically use Armour Thyroid. Armour is an actual active, so Armour Thyroid, they take the actual thyroid tissue from the pig, they dry it, grind it up, and obviously analyze it. This is not some like backwoods stuff. And it has the right proportion of actually T3 and T4 because it is actual thyroid tissue. And when you take that, it works better. Or with some patients, with my now this you can only use if someone is really, really compliant is the word I was looking for, because unfortunately with medication, even myself, compliance is the biggest thing. You know, I force myself, for example, to take my omega-3 3 times a day. If I can get it in twice a day, I'm happy, you know. But Cytomel, which is just pure T3, I prescribe that to some of my patients, and those are for the patients that, because it's very short acting, you do have to take it 2 to 3 times a day. It's not a once a day medication. So my preference is,
you have to take it 2 or 3 times a day?
Yes, Cytomel. Yes, Cytomel is a very short-acting medication. You know, it comes in 25 microgram preparations, and so the standard dose for like an adult male is 75 mics a day, and it comes in 25 mics. So you got to take 25 mics 3 times a day. It doesn't work as well when you take it once, and because you're taking a big shot of 75 mics, it can cause tachycardia and so on. So for me, I typically, the only patients that I do Synthroid with, which is, you know, T4, are my just standard patients. Weight loss is not an issue. You know, they had a little bit of a hypothyroidism, and we're just trying to bring their thyroid to a normal level, and they do fine. But when it's really about weight loss, I usually stick with Armour or Cytomel.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to, you know, the patient's doctors directly, you know, and I said, hey, you know, my client is not getting great results. You know, she's eating very clean. She's exercising an hour a day. She should be losing more weight than she's doing. She's kind of standstill. And I've literally plead with them to maybe, you know, consider T3, you know, and when I mention T3 to a normal medical doctor, it's like I talked about the devil when they're
and the problem is that most have never even prescribed it once, because from medical school, essentially your only choice is Synthroid, T4. I mean, forever and ever, that is what is kind of pounded into everybody, that you just use, you know, T4. Going back to the lab thing I want to mention, one of the other things that I always like to check is your vitamin D levels.
Yes.
Vitamin D is one of those levels that is highly, highly ignored. And we've come to realize over the last few years how important vitamin D is. And in a sense, up to a certain point, you know, I like to keep my patients, you know, their levels between 60 to 70. And I would say we can walk out into the, you know, street and grab 100 people and check all their vitamin D level. There's probably less than 10% of people that their levels are over 30. almost everyone walking around has some sort of a vitamin D deficiency. And vitamin D, you know, is a fat soluble vitamin, and we have A, D, E, K. So kind of like the first day of medical school, they teach you is ADEK, A, D, E, K. Those are your only 4 vitamins that are fat soluble. Everything else is water soluble, and those are the ones that are extremely important, and they serve different functions. And vitamin D is essentially almost a hormone. It's so important that more and more researchers call it a hormone versus a vitamin, because it controls so many different aspects of your metabolism. So it's very important to make sure that the vitamin D level is, on point. And vitamin D is one of those nice vitamins because it is fat soluble that it can only be taken once a week. You don't have to take it daily. So for most of my patients that are low, I recommend them to take, 35,000 to 50,000 international units of vitamin D once a week. Amazon sells a great brand that literally a tiny capsule has 50,000 IUs.
Oh, it does? Oh, I thought that had to be prescribed. They actually sell it? The 50,000 IUs?
And it is pharmaceutical grade.
Wow.
And what's amazing is that one bottle, I think, has 120 capsules. And since you're taking one capsule a week, that
lasts forever.
2 years, literally 2 years.
Yeah, that lasts forever.
I recommend that to everybody. But that's essentially my initial, and based on what I get back of those labs is, I tell my patients, now we're going to sit down and have a Jesus talk. And I'll tell you, Sam, I'm usually very blunt. I'm very aggressive with my patients. I do not beat around the bush, because unfortunately, by the time somebody sees me, it's not their first rodeo that they've seen some kind of a professional of some sort.
Yeah.
Whether it's a personal trainer, whether it's some other doctor, whether it's some nutritionist, whether they've tried 75 yo-yo diets. So by the time, I feel like it is my responsibility to kind of hit them with the truth. And I tell them from the beginning, I'm like, you may not really end up liking me at the end of this, but what I can promise you is that what I'm telling you is the truth. And now you can either accept it and we can kind of work together to make this happen, or, we can go making excuses. Yeah. And, next year, this time, you'll be another 20 pounds heavier, like how it's been going on the last couple of years. Because unfortunately, a lot of patients simply do not want to take responsibility for their own actions. And that is kind of the major problem. Because now if you come back and I see your thyroid is low, you're having some insulin resistance, or you're diabetic, these are things that we can jump on. Hey, your testosterone is really low. And despite all that, I tell them, okay, we're going to fix all this. This does not mean that suddenly you're going to be on the cover of Men's Fitness magazine. This means that we've removed the road bumps. We've removed that heavy backpack that you're trying to carry up a flight of stairs to make your journey easier. This doesn't mean that, like, I'm going to fix your diabetes and suddenly you're going to get a six-pack. And so that is, and I give them examples. This concept, and I know you referred to it, that, oh my God, I don't eat anything, and I don't know why I'm, 275 pounds. That is just ludicrous. And I tell them, I'm like, this is not compatible with biology. There is no living organism that cannot eat and maintain weight. Like, if that was the case, I would love to duplicate that DNA and solve world hunger, where we don't have to feed anybody and they just maintain a healthy, oral weight. That would be amazing. And the examples that one of the other fallacies that's always thrown out there is that, oh my God, if you need to eat 7 times a day to, increase your metabolism. And if you don't, your metabolism is going to go down. And that concept has been thoroughly refuted on many levels. And one of my favorite examples I like to give is we have hundreds and hundreds of cases of political prisoners that go on starvation strikes, okay? There is not one of them that maintains their weight, okay? You can look it up, hundreds and hundreds of cases of prisoners that voluntarily, or sometimes when they're almost dying, they force feed them. They go on hunger strike. So they'll drink their water, but they're not eating. Those guys will lose weight till they're skin and bone, until the fat around their heart, the insulation around their heart even melts. You could see their heart beating through their rib cage, and they'll die. And nowhere along that decline in their weight did their metabolism suddenly stop, or they stop losing weight. Just doesn't happen. Look at Survivor.
So starvation.
Look at like you know the show Naked and Afraid, where they go out in the jungle naked for like 2 weeks.
Yep.
Gotta survive, right? Do you see anybody coming back maintaining their weight? No. They go out for 2-3 weeks in the jungle eating bugs and plants. They come back lost 40 pounds and they weren't eating. Their metabolism didn't slow down, because it's your body is going to require calories just for your heart to beat, your kidneys to function, your liver to pump blood. All those things that have to happen are going to take at least 1,000, 1,200, 1,300 calories a day. And that's if you just have a sedentary lifestyle. So which means for you to tell me I'm not losing weight, you are consuming 2,000 plus calories a day. I don't care what you say. You can swear on 7 pound, 6 ounce baby Jesus coming through the clouds. You are overeating. There is no such a thing that I eat carrots and broccoli all day and somehow I'm not losing weight.
It makes total sense. Now, so you don't think there's something as, the starvation mode? Is there such a, because starvation mode typically says that you go for a long period of not eating, your metabolism doesn't stop, but it slows down. Does that refute it? Is that refuted?
We haven't seen it. Yeah. We just, the question you have to ask is, is there a figure that we can put? Because there's not a specific lab that says, here's your metabolism number, it went up or down, right? All we can go by, if we're talking about metabolism, we're talking about total weight that you have and your weight loss. And the bottom line is that if you fast, if I put you in a jail cell and don't feed you for 3 weeks, that graph of your daily plot of your weight loss is going to be a straight down. You're going to lose weight every day. There's nobody that just maintains, like there's nowhere that you'll see that someone is, 300 pounds, 250 pounds, went to Survivor show for 4 months in some, island off of New Guinea. And, they had an initial rapid decline and then they just kind of flattened out. It just doesn't happen, So does this mean that it's a good idea for maintaining muscle tone and a healthy lifestyle? No. I always bring that example for the camp that's talking about, oh my God, I eat just nothing but broccoli.
Yeah.
Somehow I'm 300 pounds.
Yeah.
That's my refutal to that no, you're not just eating broccoli.
So I have a question for you before I forget. So you said that CDC says that 50% of Americans are either diabetic or pre-diabetic, right? What's contributing to this epidemic? And I also want to ask you the same question for vitamin D, because 5-6 years ago, when I first got my vitamin D level checked, my doctor said, you're severely low on vitamin D. And he told me that, how everything that you said, and also, the mortality rate increases so much with having low vitamin D. So then I got on mega doses of vitamin D, and I've been maintaining my vitamin D levels, and but I never thought I have a vitamin D deficiency. What is the epidemic?
Most people don't.
Deficiency, and what's the epidemic?
Most people think, oh, I live in Florida. I'm in Florida. Oh, I live in Florida. I live in California. I get sun. I must have, no. This has, we're not talking about so low where you're having rickets, with disease that essentially has been eradicated. But for sure, we know for the body to proper at its optimal, your vitamin D level can't be 25. Yeah. It works a lot better at 50, 60, 70. So that's kind of where we like to be. As far as where you're talking about why we are where we are as far as diabetes, we are literally, this is how bad it is. Forget CDC. Department of Defense, DOD, put out a statement last year that diabetes, the overweightness of the United States, is the #1 existential threat to the well-being of the United States in the next 30 years. Not ISIS, not Russia, not North Korea, diabetes and overweight. And why?
The reason I'm laughing, Doc, is because I saw stand-up comedy with with Dave Chappelle, and Dave Chappelle said, he goes, you know what? He goes, what's the number one killer of black people? And he says, not the Ku Klux Klan, it's not other black people, it's salt.
Exactly, 100%. Because at some point, think about it, if we're 50% overweight, obesity has reached an all-time level, obviously diabetes, we like to pat ourselves on the back to say, oh, we've extended life expectancy from 74 to 77. Except what we don't say is that extra 3-4 years that we've added to the number, those people are in nursing homes. They're bedridden. They're dragging an oxygen tank behind them. I don't want that extra 3 years of life expectancy if that's what it's going to do. So the problem that we have is an overabundance of processed carbs. And that's kind of what it comes down to. I highly, like every one of my patients that comes in on that first day when we do the labs, and they come, we schedule them for their follow-up appointment the following week. The first thing I tell them is by the time you come back next week, I need you to watch this documentary called Fed Up on Amazon Prime. And I said, when you watch it, the reason you have to watch it is because I'm going to quiz you when you come back. Because I said, many of the things that I'm going to talk about is just going to make a hell of a lot more sense if you watch that 1-hour documentary. And I recommend that to everyone. It's called Fed Up. It's 1 hour. It's narrated by Katie Couric. They have some of the world's top-rated scientists, and they go back into the 50s and 60s, and they discuss how and why we are the way we are. I mean, if you think about it now, there is Pizza Hut in our elementaries. There is Chick-fil-A at schools. I have family friends of mine. I don't have kids old enough to be in school, but I have friends of mine that they say, oh, Johnny, he's got Burger King on Mondays at school, Chick-fil-A on Tuesday. Like they come in, and what's happening is the manufacturers are paying the schools to be there.
Because they're going to program the kid from the beginning so that this kid will eat this a lifetime, right?
It started in, if you look at the Fed Up, it discusses it how people that are old enough like us, if you remember the food pyramid that would show us, that would show bread at the bottom, and then it would go up, and then the protein and meat would
this much at the end.
Right? Well, that's not how it was initially designed. Congress was going to come out and discuss how carbohydrates are essentially poisonous to us. And what happened is there was a large grant out by, I think, like the corn manufacturers, lobbyists, and they essentially threatened that they were going to pull this hundreds of millions of dollars away. And so they essentially bribed the scientists and twisted the scientists' hand to not make carbs the enemy, but make fats the enemy. This is where the whole, in the 70s, the low-fat craze came up. And what has happened in the low-fat craze? America has just gotten fatter. The problem is not fat. The dumbest thing to understand is that in biochemistry, like in medical school, learning biochemistry, if you look at the steps that it takes much quicker steps for sugar to turn into body fat than fat to turn to body fat. And tell me if that makes any sense. Like literally, if you ate a tablespoon of butter and ate it versus a tablespoon of sugar, that tablespoon of sugar will become body fat a hell of a lot faster than that tablespoon of butter.
Fascinating.
And the fat is already fat, except it doesn't turn into body fat. And I always like to give the examples, and that's a whole separate conversation about, vegans and whether we should eat meat and so on. But at the end of the day, the conversation that I tell everybody is we are obligate, we are omnivores. We are meant to eat everything. And the way we can tell that is by our dentition. So one of the things that I can tell you,
Doctor, I do want to, if you graciously give me your time,
yes,
I do want to have a whole episode on that new Netflix documentary that's talking about having everybody going vegan all of a sudden.
Yes.
So I do. And
I
so
have a lot to say about. I have a lot to say about that.
I do, but I love it because I want to know for myself, and I like everybody and their mother all of a sudden is a vegan, but then they try it for a couple of weeks and they get back on like this shit doesn't work. I get a dozen questions.
It's just, we have to be able to consume a little bit of everything, and that's how we're designed. We're not cows. But the example that I give to my patients when they're talking about, oh, is fat bad? I'm like, listen, just look at biology out there. You'll never see a fat cheetah. You're never going to see a fat lion. You're never going to see a fat wolf. And what are they eating? They're eating proteins and fats. And the misconception actually is that, a lion or a cheetah eats a lot of protein. It's actually the opposite. When they hunt down a gazelle and they kind of tear into the guts, they're eating the liver, the kidneys, the intestines. They eat the fattiest parts first, and then they eat a little bit of ass meat later. But at the end of the day, a large part of their food is fat. And those guys are walking around shredded, striated muscles and not an ounce of fat on them. Now let's look at animals that consume lots of carbs. Cows, pig, sheep. They're going to gain weight. Even cattle farmers, the reason cows can't even process corn. They're supposed to process grass. But the reason cattle industry will fatten up the cows before slaughter with corn is because they know they're selling those cows by the pound. So they're like, if I can feed them corn and each cow gains 50 pounds times hundreds of cows, that's a lot more revenue for that. So the idea that, so why we are where we are today is the overconsumption. What I tell my patients, if it comes in a bag, if it comes in a can, if it comes in a wrapper, it is not really meant to be consumed. Because if you go and if I take a piece of steak and leave it on the counter and we come back in a week, there's going to be maggots crawling in. So why would you think that this meat concoction in this can that's got a 5-year shelf life is meant to be put in your body and digested? Just imagine what they have to put in there to make this edible.
It makes total sense, man. I mean, my grandma is 97. My wife's grandma is 95, and she's sassy and walking around like they. And I always said, nutrition 101. First day in college, they said you need variety of foods from a variety of sources, from a variety of different colors, and make sure you don't eat anything that you didn't find in your grandma's kitchen. You know what I mean? We
already have, and the best thing, Sam, is we already have amazing examples of pockets of populations around the world, and the healthiest populations that you'll see around the world that live the longest are not people that restrict themselves to anything.
Yeah.
If you look at parts of Italy, parts of Mediterranean, Greece, Okinawa, Japan, I can keep going, parts of Scandinavia, they're not vegetarians.
Yeah.
They're not vegans. They're eating meat. But guess what? Everything they're eating it as nature intended it. They don't do anything processed.
Yeah.
It reminds me back again to my grandfather lived to be, we don't know, we know when he passed away, but he was born in a war that happened between 1863 and 1868. So he could have been as young as 110 or as old as 115, my grandfather. And I remember him, he used to fry everything with lard. And he was 110 years old, but guess what? He never had anything that was processed in his life. Yeah. So it all comes down to not exposing yourself to all the crap that's out there. Everything is modified.
So I have a question for you. So, obviously, if you are, obviously you still, consume carbohydrates. What are some of your favorite carbohydrate source?
For me, I really don't restrict so the thing about what I tell my patients is that the moment you kind of consider this a diet, the moment that you really don't consider it a lifestyle, you kind of already lost.
Yeah.
You have to look at it as a lifestyle change. Yeah. And I literally never say no to this, okay? Simple example. This last weekend was my son's birthday. We're having a birthday party at this kid's gym. All the kids are there. Kids obviously want pizza, right? We had 20 boxes of pizza. Did I refrain myself from eating pizza? Heck no. I ate my pizza because I wanted pizza then. And what I tell my patients is that you're not defined by the 5% of what you do. You are defined by the 95% of what you do. And unfortunately, people always refer to or think about the good things they did. They forget about all the bad things, right? The guy who could be a serial killer, but then the one time he helped an old lady cross the street, they'll keep talking about that, right? They forgot about the other 95%. And the same thing happens with food. So what I tell them is, let's say you're typically having, 3 to 5 meals a day times 7 days a week. So let's just say you're having 30 meals a week, right? 40 meals a week. If 3-4 of those, which is 5-10%, are your kind of what you want, have at it. But as long as the other 25 meals are on point, because we don't care about that. And that's really what it comes down to. And I think
you gotta live, you gotta live, and you gotta,
you have to be able to live. If I want to have a piece of that cheesecake, I'm going to. But I'm very cognizant that, okay, you've been good, you treated yourself, but it's time to kind of get back on the, program. What happens is people kind of lose themselves. People will have that one piece of cake and then suddenly want to have the whole pie. There's not a limit. And part of that, if you watch that Fed Up, it kind of discusses the reason carbohydrates, and particularly simple carbohydrates that have a high glycemic index have such a major problem is, so when you eat, typically, this is why you can't physically overeat proteins and fats. And here's a simple explanation. Let's say you're a guy that likes to put away a 10-ounce steak, a 12-ounce New York strip, right? So, I could make you the most delicious New York strip. And if typically your portion is 12 ounce, if I put 36 ounces in front of you, are you going to be able to eat it? No. You're going to get there, and by the time you're at that 12 ounce, those last couple of bites are coming a little slower. You feel full, you're done. No matter how delicious that meat was, you physically cannot overeat it. Now, why does that happen? Is because when your stomach starts to stretch and it starts to get some nutrition, the cells in your stomach release this hormone called cholecystokinin, CCK, and it's a negative feedback mechanism that tells the brain, hey, your satiety center, hey, I'm getting full, and it kind of shuts that off. This is the same reason why if you go to a restaurant and have a small appetizer and your entree takes 30 minutes to come, you're full, even though you may have not ate much. Well, what happens is with sugary compounds, your insulin shoots through the sky, right? So the moment you have a piece of cheesecake, some chips, some Cheetos, any of those things, just don't look at it as chips. Don't look at it as a bowl of Cheerios. Look at it as a bowl of sugar, because the moment that hits the stomach, insulin shoots through the sky. And this is the example. And so when insulin goes up, guess what insulin does? It blocks
CCK.
the release of CCK.
I knew it.
So this is why we can have a whole bag of chips. You didn't intend to have that bag of chips. This is why you can sit down and have a gallon of ice cream.
I always wondered about that because you look at like I said, you have a gallon of ice cream, a pint of ice cream. I don't know how many thousands of calories is in there, but it's really easy for you to do it, but you can't physically.
And when do you stop? You stop when you're literally carrying a fetus to the point where the stomach has stretched to the point that it's uncomfortable to eat. And we've all been there where we're like, oh Lord, like you gotta grab both handles on a chair to get up. And what's crazy is that if you really refer back, whether it was last week or a year ago when you had that feeling, whoever's listening, you still could have eaten more. You're just not eating because it's just uncomfortable, not because you're still satisfied. And that's because the insulin, that high glycemic index, fully 100% blocks the feedback mechanism. So it never lets you feel full, and which is why diabetes, and insulin resistance is such a major problem.
That is profound.
I mean, in the study,
why.
in this, one of the cool things they have done, if you see this documentary, it's pretty amazing. They did a test where they took, I think, 40 rats and they got them hooked on cocaine, like legit got these rats hooked on cocaine. And what they did is then they started introducing sugar water, okay? Sugar water, cocaine, sugar water, cocaine. And then what they did is then they stopped both at the same time. Now, medically, a substance is considered addictive if it meets a certain criteria. So one of the criteria is when you use it, it must feel good. 2 is when you stop it, you go through withdrawals. So there's behavioral changes, there's physiological changes. And 3, when you reintroduce that substance, the withdrawal symptoms go away, okay? So that's how we know, no matter what it is, whether this substance is addictive or not. So they were trying to test this out. So they stopped both. So they stopped both cocaine and sugar water at the same time. And they still had the regular water, so it's not like they were, thirsty, but they stopped the sugar water and cocaine. They waited like a few days until the rats were in full withdrawal. And what they did not know is, are they in withdrawal from cocaine or they withdrawal from the sugar water? And what they did is at the same time, they reintroduced the sugar water and cocaine. 39 out of the 40 rats chose sugar water over cocaine.
You kidding me?
Yes, sir. No joke.
Sugar is more addictive than cocaine.
And to prove that,
it says how many people are addicted to sugar?
Well, I can guarantee you 50% of Americans are not on cocaine, but 50% of Americans are addicted to carbohydrate.
For sure.
So it is fully legal and it is killing you at a faster rate than cocaine ever has, right? So think about it this. So to further prove that hypothesis with the rats, then they took human subjects and gave them cocaine and did an MRI of their brain and their satiety, their happy center, to see how it lights up. And they gave them, and then they repeated the same test on the same subject with some kind of a sugary dessert. I forgot if it was a cheesecake or whatever it was. When they ate the sugary substance, their happy center was firing 5 times more than cocaine.
Wow.
It lit up. So this is a real disease. It's a disease. And what I tell my patients is, listen, we all have made judgments at some point in our life with people that have substance abuse, where it's very easy for us to say, oh, put that needle down. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Stop smoking cigarettes, those kinds of things. And we know how addictive heroin is. We know how addictive opiates are. I'm like, but how can you judge when you can't even put the cheesecake down? How can you judge that person when you can't even put the bag of chips down? If you can't put the bag of chips down, I never want to hear you. I never want to hear past judgment of why this person is addicted to opiates.
Hey, I'm going to make a bunch of Instagram stories and I'm going to quote you on some of this stuff because you gave me a billion ideas of what I want to talk about. But now you give me the scientific basis for it. I always knew a lot of the things that you talk about based on just knowing it and being in the field. But now that I got the scientific, some big basis back it up, man, this disease stuff is just profound. Just profound. You know what I mean? I mean, every time I talk to you, man, I'm both being entertained. And I'm just like, I need to go back and listen to it more and more and more and more because you put it in a perfect, you put science in a very nice, explainable way so anyone can understand. And, my clients and everyone who's listening to this are going to take so much from it. But I mean, this is just going to be the first one of many series. I hope I can pick your brain.
I would love to.
Because I think people need to know this information.
I love this country. I love where it's allowed me to flourish and become extremely successful. And every single person that gets their life together and loses weight and prevents death and mortality and passing it on. I mean, we have kids now, in this documentary, Fed Up, they're talking to,
Gotta watch out.
they talk to teachers And they're like, I've been a teacher for 30, 40 years. They're like, 30 years ago, I had one overweight kid in my class. Now 50% of my kids in class are overweight. And she's like, and I've personally seen that over 30 years. We've come to the point, I mean, I have kids that come to my practice 11 years old that are 180 pounds. Like, what is, and when you look, the mom is overweight, the dad's overweight, the siblings are overweight, and it's like, it is a disaster. Like, it's like watching that train that is about to go off cliff, and you're just kind of sitting there watching it. It's like disaster waiting to happen. And it's happening all across the country. And it's simply because people are not taking responsibilities. And what I tell my patients this, every single day when you get out of the house, from the time you open your eyes and the time you close your eyes, essentially it's you and your family against the world. Everyone is coming for you, from pollutions to bad food to a bad relationship to a bad boss or whatever it is. Like, it's you against everybody else. So why would you further kick yourself down by making those bad decisions?
Yeah.
Why would you, and sometimes really the decision between good and bad and being able to have that self-discipline to say, no, I could eat this if I want to, but I'm not, is 10 minutes, because 10 minutes later, you've forgotten about it. There are times that I'm in my own office, and just 2 days ago, I'm sitting there eating my 3 ounces of healthy nuts that I bring to work every day. I make this concoction of almonds, pistachios, Brazilian nuts.
I know you showed it to me. I know.
I throw a little bit of cranberries in there, and I eat 3 ounces. One of the things that I recommend to everybody: have 3 ounces of 100 grams of healthy nuts, unroasted, unsalted every day. It boosts your HDL, reduces your LDL, has extreme protective mechanism for the brain, Alzheimer's, all that stuff, right? As I'm sitting there enjoying my nuts, the whole staff, all the ladies, they've got McDonald's. And listen, you could hook me emotionally on McDonald's French fries. There's something about whatever crack they put in that McDonald's French fries, and they're out in the break room. I can smell the French fries coming down the hallway, and it took every energy for me not to walk down and grab a handful of fries from one of the ladies. But it was like, I talk about this. If I break now, who am I to talk about it? So I sat there and enjoyed my nuts. The moral of the story is 10 minutes later, I forgot about it.
Yeah.
It was just that one 10-minute moment of weakness that if I would have given in, because then that becomes 2, 3, and it becomes a snowball effect.
Yeah, you let your CCK kick in.
Yeah, I'm like, no, we're going to make these nuts work.
Well, Dr. Soleymani, thank you so much for your time. Like I said, I would love to interview you more and more about so many different subjects. You're a wealth of information. It's so great to know a doctor who knows medicine, knows pathology, but also knows optimization, which is what I'm here for, what I want my clients to know about, and what I know everybody to know. Now, for people who've never heard of you, can you let them know where can they find more information about you, the name of your clinics, your social media handles, your websites?
Sure. My practice is called Avecina Medical, Avecina Medical, and I'm on Instagram. Pretty much most people just follow my personal page, which is Saman Soleymani, which you can add it to the podcast. And if they have any questions, many people message and ask certain topics to discuss, and maybe those are things that you and I can collaborate and do more of these to answer kind of questions that people are really interested to hear about.
Well, I appreciate your time, doctor. Thank you so much for being on the show, and we'll talk to you very soon again.
For sure. Thank you.